Welcome to the Soul Seeker Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kabert. I started this pod back in 2019 when I was taking my first steps on the path of remembering. And at the time, the tagline for the show was a journey of self-discovery. A year later, it became a journey of remembering. Yet, what I know now is back then, I was still seeking. And what I've come to know now is that it's the journey of seeking that brings us the silent, slow stillness of acceptance. And therein lies our own innate wisdom. It's my mission now to eradicate the glorification of hustle culture, as it was my drive in entrepreneurship that led to a greater whole, and that's because I was outsourcing my sovereignty rather than looking within. So let this be your invitation to take a deep breath in and remember that at any time we can shift our thoughts and our feelings to create the outer world in which we wish to live. Soul Seekers, it's time to grow. Let's go. What is up, fam, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seeker Podcast. I am your host, Sam Kabert, as always, and we have a fun one for you all today. My guest is Michael Gelb. I met him a couple months ago at a conference we were both speakers at. He has been a speaker for well over 30 years, and he has written 17 books that have told over 1 million copies sold. And one of those books is called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. He wrote that back in 1998. And the next year, he was awarded this award called the Brain of the Year Award. Now, y'all, I didn't even know that there was a Brain of the Year Award. Like, how cool is that? If you're thinking like, what does that actually mean? Let me tell you this. Another recipient of that award was Stephen Hawking. So talk about good company to be with. Really what this episode is all about is it's how to unlock your inner genius. And we're going to unpack the 7 principles on how to think like Leonardo da Vinci. Now, you might be thinking, why Leonardo da Vinci? And for Michael, it was part of his Italian heritage. He's going to tell us why and how that is part of like his family roots and everything. I know for me, when I first came across his work, when we met at this event, I was like, Leonardo da Vinci, like that seems kind of random, especially now looking back, it's been 27 years since he wrote the book, and he was at that event speaking on how to think like Leonardo da Vinci. I'm talking with him now, even 27 years ago. Leonardo da Vinci lived, I think Michael said, 550 years ago, and it's still just as crucial to learn these principles now more than ever. In fact, a lot of things that I study, that I teach, that I'm all about, we're very much in these 7 principles. So it's cool to see these principles and have like a framework for it. So you guys are going to love this episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the show or left a rating and review, please do so. It's a great way to give back. I do this podcast and I have been doing it from, just my way of giving back. And it just fills my cup, and it's been 6 years now. So if you are getting anything out of this podcast at all and you haven't left a rating and review, if you could do me a favor and leave a rating review, it's not just for me, it's also an algorithm thing, because the more ratings and reviews that the podcast has, that means other people can discover the wisdom from these guests as well. So it's a great way to give back. So thank you so much, and enjoy this episode with Michael Gelb. Here we are for another episode of the Soul Seeker Podcast. I am here with Michael Gelb. We met at a conference, and we're going to unpack so many different topics, maybe just a drill down on a few, but Michael's written 17 books. And as I look through the books, there's so many different categories. So I'm very excited and curious to learn more about your story, Michael. But as we do always here in the Soul Seeker Podcast, we will ground with just 3 simple breaths. So Michael, for yourself, for me, and for those of you listening that are in a place to slow down and you can sit down, I would encourage you to just take the next minute to sit down and close your eyes. But if you're running, driving, or washing the dishes, anything like that at all, working out at the gym, then you can breathe with us Just, of course, don't close your eyes, right? So, Michael, for yourself, for me, and for anyone listening that can close their eyes now, feel free to do so. And as you start to shift on down, just sitting straight up, feeling your feet on the floor, and through your nose, inhaling all the way up, sipping in a bit more air at the top, and a big sigh, let it go. And another inhale all the way up, sipping in a bit more air at the top, and letting it go. And last one, as you inhale, letting the belly expand and bring that breath all the way up, sipping in a bit more air at the top, and just slight holding the breath, rolling up the eyes. And exhale, let it go, let it go. Letting the breath return to its natural state and rhythm, flickering the eyes back open. And here we are, Soul Seeker Podcast number 285 with Michael Gelb. Michael, welcome to the show. I'm stoked to have you here.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, so we met at a conference in Nashville, Tennessee. We were both speaking at a couple of months ago. And man, you came up and introduced yourself to me, and I was like, oh, nice to meet you. And you told me a little bit more about yourself. And then I looked you up, listened to a few of your podcasts, and I was like, wow, you have quite the body of work. For anyone listening that might not be familiar with your body of work, I mean, really, there's so much to cover. So I would just love to hear an introduction from yourself, about yourself, for everyone here.
Sure. So I've just been interested in truth, beauty, and goodness as the through line of my whole life and my whole career. I've never actually had a job. People ask me, where'd you go to college? I say MSU. They say Michigan State University. I say, no, make stuff up. So I've been making stuff up, and then most importantly, relating it to needs of various constituencies, people who want to be more creative, more innovative, want to be better at communicating, have more energy, better balance of their mind, body, emotions, and spirit. So those are the through lines of what I continue to do.
I feel like MSU, like make stuff up, is selling yourself short, because I know this about you. Like, you are a researcher. You're not just making stuff up. Like, do you feel like for anyone listening, or someone that's just meeting you and doesn't really know your work, like sometimes if you just make that joke, people will be like, oh, okay, and then they'll just like move on and not really be interested. You know what I mean?
Well, that's their problem. What those people need to know is that if you're really good at improv, let's say you're a jazz musician, most really fine jazz musicians train classically first. So there's a basis of a lot of practice and really understanding all the notes and all the chords and knowing your instrument and being one with the instrument. And then you can improvise. So yeah, you're right. I didn't just make stuff up out of thin air. It's predicated on decades of passionate study.
Absolutely. And you've written 17 books. I mean, you've sold over 1 million copies with the Da Vinci, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, that came out in 1998. You were just telling me that was a #1 bestseller on Amazon, like not niche categories and friends and family, back in 1998, like legit #1. I mean, you sold 750,000 copies. Like, that's enough right there. That's an interesting topic, and an interesting title. Like, personally, I don't know that much about Da Vinci. Obviously, being into spirituality and things like that, I've come across things, but I haven't done that deep dive for myself. So I think this being the Soul Seeker show, and many people not just into mindfulness, but that deep dive of spirituality, like let's start here with How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. Let's just start from the top. Like, can you introduce this topic and we'll see where it goes from there?
Sure. So I was introduced to Leonardo da Vinci by my grandmother, who was Italian, an artist. And when she told me about him, he seemed like an amazing figure. I remember, as a kid, Superman was my other hero. But as I got older, I realized Leonardo was real. Superman was just a comic book character, but Leonardo seemed to embody the fullness of human potential. And I found myself being invited in my 20s to speak to groups around the world about creativity and innovation. And I told stories about Leonardo, and they seemed to particularly resonate. So actually, the funny thing is that there was a group, they still exist. I've spoken to them all over the world for decades. They're called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. They're heads of companies. They get together for education and networking. And I was speaking to them at one of their premier events called the University in Washington, D.C., on the topic of innovation. But I knew they were having one of their universities in Florence, which is my favorite city. And I just had this kind of sense of a soul resonance with both Florence and with Leonardo da Vinci. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm looking over there. There's one of my grandmother's paintings on the wall. So this is my lineage and a great connection. Anyway, I figured that the head of the education program for Florence might be attending the Washington, D.C. event, and that he might approach me and ask me what I would do if they were to invite me to Florence. And I figured he might say something like, we want something really special, because I imagine that a lot of other people wanted to go to Florence too. So you ever have something happen like that where you picture a scenario in your mind and it comes true exactly as you pictured it? Mm-hmm. I finished my talk in DC, and a gentleman approached me and he said, I'm the education chair for Florence. He said, if we were to invite you, what would you do? And then he said, we want something really special because everybody wants to go to Florence. So I looked him right in the eye and I said, how about how to think like Leonardo da Vinci? And he said, can you really do that? And I said, sure. So I had 6 months to make it up. But I had been studying this for years. But now I've committed myself to do this in front of a very critical audience of company presidents who pay a lot of money to come to these events. And when you're speaking, there are other concurrent events. And if they don't like you, they score you out of 10. They'll give you a 2 and they'll walk out in your face. So I've been to a lot of these, and I've seen people start with, a couple hundred in the audience, and they wind up a few minutes later with 6 or 7 people. It is not an easy audience, but I was all in. I just went for it. I literally went to the place where Leonardo was born. I went to the place he died. I walked his footsteps, the notebooks over and over again, with one guiding question. What is he trying to teach us? What is his real message for the world today? And it turns out that in his notebooks, he gives lots of advice to his students. So what I did was translate that advice into contemporary terms. And I made up this talk, which I gave to the company presidents in Florence. They loved it. Nobody walked out. I got invited back to speak about it. And I thought, wow, this really resonates. Why don't I turn this into a book? So yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of research. I spent the next 4 years researching it intensively. And then the book came out, and the rest is, as they say, the future.
Great. That's an amazing story. And I'm so happy to hear that you nailed it and you didn't get walked out, have people get up and leave, because that doesn't feel good, right? Or I wouldn't imagine. Anyway, so let's talk about what people can actually learn from Leonardo da Vinci. Like, what are some of the core tenets, would you say?
Well, there are 7 principles for thinking like Leonardo. that I abstracted from his writing. So in the book, in How to Think Like Leonardo, first, of course, I give people background about the Renaissance, about the life of Leonardo, about why he's considered perhaps the greatest genius of all time. But the heart of the book are the 7 principles, where we go really deep into, first, why is this a Da Vinci principle? From what, I didn't just make that up. I took it right from words he says, from guidance he gives to his students. And the first one is to access and enliven our birthright of genius, which is our natural curiosity. So, most kids are really curious. They ask questions all the time, but they go to school, they become so-called grown-ups, and they get more focused on answers than questions. But one of the secrets of a personal renaissance is to be passionate about what you're really curious about. I mean, that's why you do this podcast. Mm-hmm. You're passionate about learning, and the people who are sharing this experience with us, they want to learn, they want to know. So how do you do that? Well, Leonardo gives practical advice on how to do it. One of the things he guides us to do is keep a notebook or a journal and write down your questions every day. And the more you write down your questions, the deeper those questions resonate. So you get to what are the deepest questions of your life. And one of the great poet Rilke said, "Live the question." So it is, what happens when people get old, what we call old, what we're really talking about is they've lost that childlike openness. They've lost that playful, imaginative, passionate curiosity. But the people who have that stay young forever. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of other practical guidance on how to do this. But if you like, we can go through a quick review of the 7 principles, and then you can ask me what you want to know more about. How about that?
Yeah, let's pause here and unpack those questions before we move forward, and then we can get into the other remaining 6. Does that sound good?
Whatever you like.
Cool. So you mentioned to write down those questions. Now, I'm curious, I think so often that we outsource our sovereignty in someone else, right? We look for the answers, and we ask someone a question, or we need to call up that friend to hold space for ourselves. Are these the times that you're saying, hey, instead of outsourcing your sovereignty and looking externally for the answer, come to your journal and ask that question? That's what you're saying here, right?
Well, it's both and. You don't have to give up your sovereignty to be curious and dialogue with, whether it's ChatGPT or a brilliant friend or...
It's a slippery slope. Okay. I think a lot of people no longer know how to access their own innate intuition because they're always asking outside of themselves.
Well, that is a missing link for a lot of people. And at the same time, we live at a time that Leonardo would be thrilled about, where... Mm-hmm. In terms of data, in terms of information, in terms of the wisdom of all traditions, it's instantly available for free if you know what to ask. Mm-hmm. So the juxtaposition, the dance between that external quest, asking questions, gathering information, and I know you understand this, otherwise we wouldn't have started the podcast with 3 breaths, but taking the time to breathe and come in to your own being. And then it is a great point is ask and ye shall receive. But you receive when you're quiet. Mm. So one of the other things Leonardo guides us to do is go for a walk in nature, for example. I was just taking a Epsom salt and lavender bath, which is one of my preferred modalities for meditation. I did a intense rucking walk. This morning I walked with 30-pound weights. Wow. While listening to fabulous music. So I was walking and dancing with 30 pounds of weight. And then I thought, okay, now it's time for a bath before my podcast. But just in the bath, what I love about the bath is the body, the sense of physicality existing physically disappears. So there's just pure consciousness. And from that pure consciousness, I was really contemplating my most fundamental life questions in terms of the purpose of like going even deeper into what is the purpose of my life and how am I of service in this moment in my life. And then this thing I've learned is remember to wait for the answer. It's like, don't hawk God. It's like, and I need to know this, and how about this, and talk to this, and yada yada, and blah, and I'm praying for this, and I'm asking for pause, breathe, and really be receptive. And what's really cool is like just right now in the bath, I got some really powerful answers that I've already acted on.
Nice.
So yeah, and then rinse and repeat. Ask the profound question, listen, follow the guidance. And that's called life.
Yeah, it's such a great reminder and such a great practice. I mean, that's something I continuously come back to because I know that I guide it for others. I've had my big experiences, but sometimes, on a daily basis, there's just those little things that come up where I find myself like maybe looking outside myself for that answer before just asking myself first. And I think a real tool that helped me build awareness around this, like when I was earlier on my path of spirituality, like we talk about signs and synchronicities and things like that, or animal messengers. Like what was it? A whale. I had a whale come up a few days ago. Like literally, I live here at the beach, and I'm seeing this whale out there, and I've lived out here for 6 years, and I've seen whales maybe 5 times, so that's a big moment to see a whale just out of the blue looking out into the ocean from the beach. And I was like, I wonder what that means. I got distracted with something else because where I'm at in my journey now, I'm not as like deep with like really sitting with that and be like, what does that mean? But I know at the beginning of my journey, when I was like really into this stuff, I would immediately go on Google and be like, spiritual meaning of the whale, right? And then someone pointed out to me like, hey, kind of like what you're talking about now, can you pause and ask yourself and find that answer with your intuition? And then what's a fun exercise from there is then go and Google it and be like, oh, wow, I was right on point. And then you no longer start to gaslight yourself and you learn to build the muscle of your intuition. So I love this first principle, really. Yeah, it's great.
And it leads so naturally into the second one, which is in Italiano, dimostrazione, which means to demonstrate things through your own experience. So when you're really passionately curious, that's provides the energy. And then Leonardo counsels, think for yourself. He says you must become an inventore, an original thinker, which at his time, after 1,000 years of the Middle Ages in Europe, nobody questioned anything. It was believed then that all knowledge was already known, and it was heresy to question accepted knowledge. Right? Now the challenge to independent thinking is there's too much information, and a lot of it is nonsense. So yes, the testing things in your own experience through your own deep critical thinking, as well as intuitive attunement. It's you have to find a balance of the two. The intellect has a bad rap in a lot of personal development, but I think it's being sold short. I think being well read and well educated and thoughtful and understanding the principles of logical critical thinking is just as important as knowing how to trust your gut. And again, it's not an either or. We want to do both. We want to be reference our own inner wisdom and avail ourselves of wonderful wisdom that's all around us. We want to be able to think things through really carefully. This is what I teach I do a lot of coaching for CEOs and senior leaders who have to make really important decisions. And what I always tell them is, first, analyze all the data, then trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to just trust your gut and you don't really know anything, you don't have that much to go on. Intuition is, I consider it, super fast processing. It's processing outside of a linear timeline. So it's just, you get this aha. But then if your intuition is going to be validated, it's going to turn out to be useful, practical, valid. It will meet the test of it will actually turn out to have been a logical conclusion. You just reached it so fast, not through traditional logic. So,
have you ever felt overwhelmed by emotions and unsure how to move through them? Sam created the Breath Club to help you find calm and clarity. In this free online community, Sam teaches how to regulate your nervous system through breathwork and process emotions effectively. Did you know that most emotions only last 90 seconds when you fully allow yourself to feel them? This is called the 90-second rule, and it's a powerful tool backed by science for emotional healing. Each week, Sam hosts live calls to guide breathwork practices and create real connection. You'll also get access to an online course and pre-recorded breathwork videos. The link to join is in the show notes.
You might recall that this is one of my messages of soul life balance. And what's fascinating is that message came through 6 years ago, and I wrote my book Soul Life Balance in 2022. But in December of 2024, just this past December, what I started to realize was, for me, how I approach soul life balance is really more from mindset. So I've been starting to reframe it into a soul life mindset. And that's exactly what you're talking about here, like what I'm teaching and what I'm about and how I make decisions, right? Both from the analytical mind, or to get, scientific here, talk about like the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking mind, versus the limbic brain of like the emotional brain. So it's really this blending of the archetypal energies of both yin and yang, or the outer world and the inner world. So I'm a huge fan of that. I love it.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's the second one. So then moving on to the third principle.
Right. So the third one is, in Italiano, it's sensazione, sharpening all your senses. So Leonardo wrote that the senses are the ministers of the soul. But 550 years ago in Tuscany, he also wrote, the average person looks without seeing, touches without feeling, breathes in without awareness of aroma or fragrance, talks without thinking, eats without tasting. So that was 550 years ago in Tuscany. So
I was just thinking about that, how far back that was. And I'm like, man, have we made much progress out here in the West?
So the good news is, we have access. If we choose it, we can make our lives incredibly beautiful every day. Mm-hmm. We have amazing resources and opportunities, and the best way to do it remains the same as it was in Leonardo's time, which is just to be out in nature if you possibly can. But make your life as beautiful as you can every single day.
Let's talk about nature real quick, because you live in New York City, is that right?
I live in Rhinebeck, New York, 2 hours north of the city.
Okay, yeah, I don't really know New York that much. I have family out in Jersey, and I've been in New York a few times, but I've definitely come across people that live in like a concrete jungle type place, and their kind of response to when I say things like getting out in nature, they're like, I can't, there's literally, there aren't any trees out here. And I'm like, well, you understand everything is nature. Walking outside is being in nature. It's just noticing the changing in the wind. Maybe there's pigeons there, these small little things. But I'm curious for you, like when you hear someone say like, oh, it must be nice, or I can't get into nature because I live in concrete jungle, or whatever it is, like what comes up for you?
Well, this chapter of the book is filled with countless exercises that people can do for precisely that circumstance, because most of my clients actually are corporate people, and a lot of them are in cubicles all day. So they would love to just be in a city. They're in a cubicle on a screen. And there's still quite a lot you can do. Even the slightest little thing to make your life more beautiful is, I have over here, you can't see it on the screen, but I have an aromatherapy diffuser that diffuses rose and lavender, which is the aromatherapy that Leonardo used in his studio. And over here, I have a little painting that somebody made for me. I don't know if you can see that, of I can see the birds out of all the windows. That's part of why I chose to live where I live. But I also have this beautiful bird right here, and I have the Buddhist metta prayer right here. So I have a singing bowl over there. I have a globe to remember to see the whole world. I don't know if you can see this. There it is. I have a globe right here. So I have a beautiful plant right there. I have a salt lamp over here. So none of these things cost much money.
My feet are on a heated salt lamp right now as we speak. It's so good.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So these are simple, inexpensive things that anybody can do just at your desk. And I counsel people, first, really think creatively. What can you do every day to make your life more beautiful? And how can you make life more beautiful for other people? And it turns out that one of the greatest ways to make your life more beautiful is to figure out how to make life more beautiful for other people. Really think about that creatively every day and write down what comes to you in your journal. Your life will get more and more beautiful every single day.
Yeah, I like it. I'm a fan of that. So that's principle 3, right? So now we're at 4.
The fourth one is to embrace uncertainty and the unknown.
Oh, that's a good one. The shadow work, huh?
We have to smile like the Mona Lisa in the face of uncertainty. And literally, it was Leonardo's the artist who brought forth shadow into painting because it made the light more illuminating. So Leonardo understood there is no light without shadow. And he advanced that understanding in art in a way that changed the way we all see the world. This is part of why he's considered to be such a genius, just one of the many, many reasons. But he manifested this in these paintings, like the Mona Lisa, like the Last Supper, like the Virgin of the Rocks. And he intended it as a metaphor for precisely what you just expressed, that we have to learn to navigate the shadow in order to really understand the light. We have to embrace it. There is no light without shadow. And part of the secret of life is to be able to keep that little smile like the Mona Lisa in the face of change and challenge and uncertainty.
I love that. I'm just taking notes. I'm taking notes. This is so good. Yeah, I think that's a really good point there with the Mona Lisa as well, like the little smile, because that's something I've thought about at some point in my life, but I haven't really addressed it or talked it out with anyone before. That's a good point, that it is like a small little smirk, Yeah, I like that.
It's the most, think about it. It is the most recognized icon on the planet. It's by far the most famous work of art in human history. And it's this portrait. People say, I went to France, I went to the Louvre, I stood in line for hours, I went and saw it. I don't get what's the big deal. Well, it's a big deal. And one of the great ways is experientially, is literally go look at the painting and then practice the smile. Practice her posture and notice how it makes you feel.
Wow, I love that. Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna Google Mona Lisa right now on my computer, and I would encourage all of you to get out your phone and do that too, so you can actually integrate something from this podcast. No, that is a great point to just embody the characteristics there. Huh. I love that. And are you into the Mandela effect at all? Isn't there a Mandela effect with the Mona Lisa?
You mean a mandala?
No, the Mandela effect, like alternate timelines, like how things change. Are you familiar with that? That's a whole nother topic.
Like Mandela, like Nelson Mandela,
Like
or
Nelson Mandela, like so basically there a lot of examples are like Jiffy, or is it Skip peanut butter? No, the good one I like is the Monocle Man. Like, did the Monocle Man have, or the Monopoly Man, did he have a monocle?
well, there's a whole Seinfeld episode about that.
Yeah, but how do you remember it? Did he have a monocle?
The I'm an
Monopoly
almond
Man.
butter person, so
Never
I
mind.
skip the peanut butter.
Yeah, I'm talking about Monopoly. Never mind. Let's get off that. Anyways, I'll look it up later because now I'm curious what the Mandela effect is with Mona Lisa, because I think they're very one. All right, so that was number 4. I'm just going to summarize that as shadow work. Number 5, let's get into that.
Number 5 is the balance of art and science, of yin and yang, of the masculine and feminine principles, of light and dark, of the metaphor of the left and right hemisphere of the brain. So it's the marriage of logic, analysis, and reason with intuition, imagination, and playfulness. And again, these are often associated with science and art. So part of why Leonardo's considered the greatest genius in human history is he was a genius of both science and art. Mm-hmm. And so we know people who are great scientific geniuses and people who are great artists, but Leonardo was both at an incredibly high level. And then he gives advice on what you can do to develop the balance between these two modalities. And this is a lot of the really practical methodology in terms of how do you generate and organize ideas that I teach. And of course, it's in the book, and it's based on the advice Leonardo gave to his students on how to do this.
That's awesome. Could you share one of those?
Yeah, sure. It's called mind mapping. It was originated by my friend Tony Buzan, who was inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. And there are many programs for how to do it online, but the best way to do it, for starters, is the old-fashioned way. These are my colored pens and my big blank sheets of paper, and it's a way of generating, organizing your ideas using imagery, color, and keywords, so that it gets you to express the logic and the imagination in your mind and manifest it in your own hand before you interface with the computer. Mm-hmm. And so I've actually written 18 books. I had a new one come out, and they've all been written with mind maps. So
I was going to say, I've written 6, and all my books have been written with mind mapping at first too. I've always taken either a small piece of printer paper or big Post-it, like the easel board ones, and just I don't do a bunch of different colors. I just write what the topic is in the middle, draw a circle, and then start lines. And then from there, I'm like, all right, now I'm going to take this to Google document and figure out an outline. And then I don't know about, this is again going down a rabbit hole. I don't know about for you, but for me, when I write from inspiration. So I write out of order a lot of times. I'll sit down, look at my outline and be like, what do I feel like writing about now? As opposed to just writing in order. Sometimes that can make it a little confusing in terms of the editing process. I'll have to go back to make things flow nicely, but it's been so fruitful for me in the 6 books I've written, at least,
Wonderful. Well, the writer's motto is write drunk, revise sober.
That's good. Yeah.
And I learned mind mapping directly from Tony Buzan in the late 1970s. In 1982, I became the first master teacher of Tony's work. And he was a huge fan. He was inspired by the notebooks of of Leonardo da Vinci. And in the early 80s, I introduced mind mapping to the United States in a series of seminars I taught all over the country called High Performance Learning. And I'm thrilled to hear that you've used it to write your books.
This is awesome, Michael. I keep learning so much more about you. That's why I'm like, hey, can you just introduce yourself? Like, I mean, I'm looking at your website, looking at your bio. I met you and we chat. And I'm like, what don't you cover? You know, like there's so much ground. So no, that's incredible. Wow. All right, cool. So that's number 5, yin yang, if we will. And number 6.
Number 6 is in Italiano, it's corporalità. It's balance the body and the mind. So most people know Leonardo was an artistic genius. Many people know he was also a scientific genius, but he was also remarkably physically gifted. He was renowned as the strongest man in Florence. He was a master equestrian, a fencer, and very graceful. People used to just turn out to watch him walk down the street because he was just such a beautiful figure. He gives advice to his students on health and wellness that is as relevant today as when he wrote it 550 years ago. He says, learn to preserve your own health. He says, avoid grievous moods, keep your mind cheerful. Today we call that psychoneuroimmunology. He says, eat a healthy, wholesome diet of the freshest foods you can find. He says, savor every meal, dine with friends whenever you can, go for a walk after dinner. What else do you need to know? I mean, it's So, you know, this has been a passion of mine, is how people can optimize the somatic side of their fulfillment of their potential. And so again, there's lots of practices and things that I've tested myself. You know, now I've been studying this for 53 years. Mm-hmm. So
this makes me think about something you said earlier about like how most people don't really see, they don't really, all these different things. And one of the ones you said is taste. And for you, like I'm a big foodie. I used to have a food show on YouTube. I love to cook and love to eat out and all the things. And for years, my whole life pretty much, I've just inhaled my food, and it is so hard for me to slow down. And one of the things that my son's mom says is to chew 27 times, like have 27 bites before you swallow. Have you heard that before?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I studied macrobiotics in the 70s, and they chew it even longer. But I find that gets a little boring. My take is everyone has their own natural rhythm and when you get in touch with your own system, you have your own natural rhythm of how you most enjoy dining. Mm-hmm. And if you just, again, it comes back to ask yourself, ask your body, what do I want? What's available? What's the freshest, most wholesome choices? And then ask yourself this question, how will I feel afterwards? And tune in. And then every meal becomes really almost like a sacrament. I mean, it's, you know, to me, food is the most reliable and intense pleasure. You can dine. You know, I look forward to dinner. I cook for myself. I cook for my friends. I'm a foodie my whole life. Coming from Italian heritage, I love wine. I pair fine food and wine. That also helps to create a beautiful rhythm of dining. Like you don't have to worry about eating too fast because you're going to want a sip of wine. And if you drink a fine wine, you're going to take your time. You're going to smell it. And then you take that wine and you notice that part of what's great about wine and food is the wine makes you then want to enjoy the next bite of food that much more. Right food, you taste that food, it's like, what could be more perfect now than just a glass of just this, a sip of just this Barolo that I chose for tonight's dinner. So that, that art, that harmony is part of the art of living. And the Italians have this figured out. They call it dolce vita. And the French are pretty good at it too. It's called joie de vivre. But in the US, we only have happy hour, just one little hour.
So a different vibration, a very different vibration.
But I try to help my clients, my friends, my readers make every hour happier. And so the corporalità chapter and the sensazioni chapter in the book guide people in depth with a lot of practices on how to actually make your life more beautiful. Put more dolce in your vita. That's what I talk about.
Well, I hope to break bread with you one day because, man, I just like that. I was transported listening to you speak. I was like, oh, man, I'm somewhere else right now. Anyway, so number 7, the final principle. What's this one?
If you're looking for a powerful and transformative experience for your next event, consider bringing in Sam Kabert as a keynote speaker. Sam's message of soul life balance and his expertise in mental health and mindfulness resonate deeply with audiences. He not only inspires with his story, but also offers practical tools like breathwork to help attendees regulate their emotions and reconnect with themselves. You can even have Sam lead a guided breathwork journey, creating a truly unforgettable experience. To learn more or book Sam for your event, check out the link in the show notes to book a call with Sam now.
So it's connezione. Everything connects to everything else. So Leonardo was a systems thinker. He saw the earth as a living being. He saw everything as really interconnected. And this is very, for my corporate clients, I help them figure out what is your vision, what is your mission, what is your higher purpose, what are your goals, what is your strategy, and what are you going to do every day to make that real? For individuals, we all want to have the same process. What is your purpose? What is your vision? What is your mission? What are your goals? What are your strategy? And what are you doing every day? And if there's always big gaps. So what are you going to do to bridge the gaps? What am I doing today? What's the most glaring gap between how I want to live my life and how I am living my life? And what's one little thing I can do today to bridge that gap? You can't, it's just like, I'm watching playoff basketball, and the Knicks were down by 20 points to the Celtics. There is no 21-point shot, but play after play after play, they worked them back and they won that game. And then they won the next game when they were down 20 points, and then they won the series. So what can you do? What little things can you do today that are in the direction of your dreams? So what are your dreams? Define them, write them down, put them in your notebook, put reminders of them all over your house, and then ask yourself, what little things can I do to make my life more beautiful, more in alignment with how I want it to be, and rinse and repeat for the rest of your life.
I'm a huge fan of that, huge fan of a lot of things you just mentioned. And, a big theme for me the past year or so has been embodiment. I'm like, if I am embodying my core values, my beliefs, and all of these other things, then everything else just falls into place. And all that is just focusing on the little things. Like you said, it's the little things, so cool. Love that. And I gotta give a shout out to the Knicks, because at the time of this recording, it's May 20th, and the Warriors, my team, were just eliminated about a week ago. And I do think that we probably would have taken it all if Steph didn't get hurt. But I'm curious, just a fun little side note here. What do you think about the Knicks' chances of winning it all this year?
What I love about this year's playoffs is the two matchups in the semifinals. Just couldn't be more exciting. I'm a Warriors fan. I love Steph. I'm a Lakers fan. I love LeBron. I love the Nuggets. I love to see Jokic. What I love to see is greatness, excellence, magnificence, the heights of human performance. That's why I love basketball. Plus, I can relate to it because I used to play. So we can all imagine ourselves doing what they're doing, except they're doing it at a level that's on a whole other realm. But nonetheless, we can all connect to it. So I'm just excited because I love all these teams. I do think it's fascinating that because the NBA has driven the league toward parity with the players agreement, so it's so easy to move from one team to another, to another, to another. It's very hard to stack a roster and have just something that's so overwhelmingly better than anybody. What's really fascinating is all four of these teams in the Final Four are guard driven. And the team that's going to win is going to be the team whose guard optimizes the talent of all the other role players. Because these aren't heavily over superstar laden teams. They're not the usual three superstars that you need.
And relating that to Da Vinci's principles, that's the seventh principle, right?
Well, I see. Thank you for noticing. Yeah. So the connection that, for example, Tyrese Halliburton is making by reading the game and bringing out the best of everybody and reading what's happening on the floor. And Brunson's doing the same for the Knicks, and Shea is doing that for OKC. And we'll see if Anthony Edwards can do it for Minnesota. And my prediction is whichever guard facilitates the highest level of connezione, that will be the team that is crowned champion.
Well, thanks for indulging me. I don't talk sports often on this podcast, and I stopped watching sports in 2019 when I started my spiritual journey, and I'm just like slowly re-emerging back into sports. And basketball has always been like my number one love, so it feels good to kind of start with basketball. But I did notice like a couple of years ago when I tried watching the Niners in the playoffs or something like that, it was just like, it was overstimulation just to watch it on the TV. I was like, just so, my nervous system was reacting to just, it wasn't even the commercials. It was just like the sense, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I record it so I can fast forward through the commercials, or I close my eyes and I meditate during commercials, and I shut the sound off and I play beautiful music in the background. Because I know exactly what you mean. Is just the, it's horrifying. I mean, talk about sensazione. We'll come back to an earlier principle. And the opposite of dolce vita is the commercials are usually for the most vile, disgusting food, so-called food. I mean, just hideous stuff that will then cause you to have the diseases for which they are advertising the pharmaceuticals. So those are the two themes of commercials: horrible, disgusting food that if you eat it, you're going to need the drugs that they're advertising. So I try to look at that, and be compassionate and bless humanity and think about how to make life more beautiful so that people will have greater discernment so that they can be guided to what Leonardo counsels us for their food: fresh, wholesome, simple, clear, clean. It's easy, it's not hard, and it's not expensive to have beautiful food. We have an abundance of it. It's just people aren't aware and they don't know how to get it if they're in a lot of environments. And then they will need those horrible drugs. So that's the downside. But I just literally close my eyes and meditate, listen to beautiful music. And then when I watch Steph, with the quickest release ever and just turning around because he knows it's going in.
Yeah.
His whole body, because it's, people think, he makes it look so easy. He makes it look so easy because he's taken hundreds of thousands of practice shots where he's using effectively the whole earth is rippling through his body to release that ball in the blink of an eye, and it's going in. So that it's that kind of ultimate expression of human performance that I love, and I'm willing to come up with a strategy to navigate through the horrible commercials and the screen to watch the game. Yeah.
It's funny you bring that up because just yesterday I was on a podcast, a pickleball podcast, and I was sharing like nervous system regulation with their listeners that are like pickleball enthusiasts. And they asked how this could be applied in real time with athletes. And I use Steph as an example because it's been well documented that where he was asked, like, what is the number one skill that you attribute to your success? And it quote unquote, honestly, breathing. That's what he said. And then you look at Steph talk about in the post-game interview as his team got eliminated, and he's 37 years old going into his 17th season in the league next year with a hamstring injury for the first time in his career. And in the post-game, he's talking about how he's sad. And he's like, honestly, he's just sad. I'm grieving right now. I'm sad. And, you know, I'm like, I love this so much because the guy is talking about breath work. He's talking about nervous system regulation. He's talking about feeling his feelings and not bypassing them. And actually, like, he's just such a good role model all around, you know, it's amazing.
Well, he's one of the rare high level athletes who does not speak in cliches. He's authentic. You know, usually they say, well, you know, got to give 100% and,
Did you see that movie with Brendan Fraser in the late 90s called I think it was like Bedazzled or something?
Oh,
yeah, that was that one. Yeah,
that was brutal.
yeah. I hope you guys are sticking with this sports talk and you know the movie that I was referring to. Well, unfortunately, we gotta wrap this up because I could go forever. This has been so much fun. I have one final thing I wanted to touch on and just ask you about. I noticed in your bio that you received the Brain of the Year award 1999, the year after you wrote How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And the Brain of the Year award, other recipients include Stephen Hawking. So talk to us a little bit about the Brain of the Year award. I haven't heard of that before.
Well, Tony Buzan, the guy who invented mind mapping, created what he called the Brain Foundation. And it was to promote what he calls mental literacy, which is understanding how your mind works and how to improve your memory as you get older, how to read faster, how to generate ideas and be more creative. So this is what I studied. And to promote this, he also sponsored the World Memory Championships, which is continued to this day.
That's awesome.
And the whole world of mind games. So Grandmaster Raymond Keane, the chess columnist of the London Times for many years, is the co-founder of the Brain Foundation and helped to curate the Brain of the Year award. So they gave it out every year to the person or persons who they deemed made the contribution to mental literacy in, at least they were recognized in that year. It didn't have to be in that year. So yeah, I got it in 1999. That was pretty cool. And it was like a real award, you know, that I got a beautiful
brain
sculpture. It's a sculpture, it's a glass from a glass artist of the brain, and an actual big cash prize from a corporate sponsor. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like one of the coolest awards I've ever heard of, like especially the physical award. That's dope. I love it. Well, Michael, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. It's been so much fun. I hope you guys have gotten so much out of it. You can find how to get in touch with Michael, his books, all the things in the show notes. Any final thoughts or places you might want to take people, Michael?
Well, just to let people know that in addition to the book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, during the pandemic, we made a 6.5-hour super high quality video course on how to think like Leonardo da Vinci. And when people go to michaelgelb.com, they can click on the link to the course and get the first lesson for free.
Cool.
So just if you want to just get one lesson for free, go get it. And plus there's a lot of other free stuff, a lot of videos on Leonardo, on how to enjoy wine and food and nature and body and mind and all sorts of cool stuff. So
amazing. Thank you, sir. And guys, go to the show notes. You can find the link there to go directly to that course to get the first lesson for free. Michael, thank you so much. This has been an honor, and I'll connect with you real soon.
I look forward to it. Ciao.
Thank you for listening to the very end. I hope you enjoyed this episode just as much as I did. If you are a first responder or a veteran and you want to go deep with me, I do something called a breakthrough session. We utilize mental emotional release, and it reprograms the subconscious mind, and it has been scientifically proven to totally alleviate PTSD. If you want to go deeper on that and get a free session with me, for the first 2 people that reach out, I'd be happy to do a free complimentary session. Usually it's around $5,000 to $10,000, and it is an all-day experience. So if you're a veteran or first responder and you really feel a resonance here and you want to go deeper, reach out to me. Either way though, join the free Breath Club. That's a great place to start. If you're a first responder or a veteran and you want to join Breath School, reach out to me and I'd be happy to extend a free membership. I hope you guys got so much out of this. I enjoyed this episode with Angela. I hope to collaborate with her in some in-person experiences real soon. And thank you so much. And I will see you on the next episode of the Soul Seeker Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the very end. I hope you dug this podcast just as much as I enjoyed it. If you got anything at all, please, if you could just do me a favor and leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast, it helps the show grow. So thank you for considering to leave a review. If you want to go deeper with Soltara or Elan, you can find the links to connect with them in the show notes. And if you want to work with me, the best way to work with me, the easiest way to work with me is the free way, and that's by joining the Breath Club. The link to the Breath Club is in the show notes. And also know that I'm available for one-on-one support, that is coaching and guidance, as well as keynotes and breathwork journeys for conferences and events. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next episode of The Soul Seeker.